What if I told you that in the late 1950s, the United States seriously considered detonating a nuclear bomb on the moon? Not in science fiction, but in classified government documents with a real timeline for execution. The Cold War reached a terrifying new frontier on October 4, 1957. Americans looked up at the night sky, knowing that for the first time, a Soviet-made object, Sputnik 1, was orbiting above their heads. This small metal sphere, just 23 inches across, shattered America's sense of technological superiority and sparked a wave of national anxiety. The Soviet achievement couldn't have come at a worse time for American pride. Just months earlier, the U.S. Vanguard rocket program had suffered humiliating public failures, with rockets exploding on launch pads in what newspapers mockingly called Flopnik and Kaputnik. President Eisenhower received intelligence reports suggesting American defensive capabilities had fallen dangerously behind Soviet advancements. As 1957 drew to a close, rumors began circulating through intelligence channels that the Soviets weren't finished with their cosmic demonstrations. The Pittsburgh Press reported on November 1st that the USSR planned to explode a rocket-borne H-bomb on the moon to coincide with the lunar eclipse on November 7th, the anniversary of the October Revolution. The prospect of a Soviet hammer and sickle, symbolically stamped on the moon through nuclear fire, was too much for military planners to bear. In this atmosphere of paranoia and wounded national pride, the United States Air Force quietly approached the Armor Research Foundation, ARF, at the Illinois Institute of Technology. They made an extraordinary request to study the feasibility and effects of detonating a U.S. nuclear bomb on the lunar surface. The project received the innocuous codename A Study of Lunar Research Flights, or Project A119. The true purpose was far from scientific curiosity. As Dr. Leonard Reiffel, the physicist who would lead the project, later admitted, it was clear the main aim of the proposed detonation was a PR exercise and a show of one-upmanship. The Air Force wanted a mushroom cloud so large it would be visible on Earth. To explore the possibility of nuking the moon, the Air Force needed scientific expertise of the highest caliber. They found their leader in Dr. Leonard Reiffel, a brilliant physicist who had worked alongside Enrico Fermi, one of the architects of the nuclear age. In the summer of 1958, Reiffel assembled a 10-member team at the Armor Research Foundation. Among the scientific luminaries recruited was Gerard Kuiper, a Dutch-born astronomer who had discovered several moons in our solar system and would later have the Kuiper Belt named after him. Kuiper brought along his promising doctoral student, a young astronomer named Carl Sagan. Personnel records uncovered decades later revealed that Sagan was hired as a part-time temporary assistant physicist at $3 per hour, starting September 3, 1958. His specific assignment was to calculate how lunar dust would behave when disturbed by a nuclear explosion in the moon's low-gravity environment. This seemingly academic question had practical importance. If too much dust was kicked up, it might obscure the explosion's visibility from Earth, defeating the project's primary purpose. The scientists involved had to reconcile their participation in a military operation with their scientific ethics. Many justified their involvement by focusing on the potential scientific discoveries. A nuclear blast could reveal details about lunar geology, chemistry, and seismic properties that were otherwise impossible to study with 1950s technology. For some, including possibly Sagan, there was even speculation about whether the explosion might unearth evidence of microbial life beneath the lunar surface. The team operated under strict secrecy. Each member underwent rigorous security clearance procedures, signing non-disclosure agreements and espionage certificates, acknowledging the severe penalties for revealing classified information. Ironically, it would be Sagan himself who later breached this security when he mentioned 2 classified papers from the project in a 1959 academic fellowship application, a fact that would help bring the project to light decades later. The initial vision for Project A119 was dramatic: detonate a hydrogen bomb on the lunar surface. However, Air Force officials quickly vetoed this idea. The problem wasn't ethical concerns, but practical limitations. H-bombs were simply too heavy for the delivery systems available in the late 1950s. Instead, the team settled on using a W-25 nuclear warhead. At just 68 centimeters long and 44 centimeters wide, this compact weapon could be carried by fighter jets or mounted on Air-2 Genie air-to-air rockets. Despite its small size, the W-25 packed a devastating 1.7 kiloton yield, approximately 1/10 the destructive power of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, but still powerful enough to create a spectacular lunar display. The target location was crucial to the mission's success. The team determined that the ideal spot would be along the Terminator line, the boundary between the illuminated and dark portions of the moon. If the bomb detonated on the dark side, but near this boundary, the resulting dust cloud would be dramatically illuminated by the sun, creating maximum visibility from Earth. Reiffel's team calculated that with the intercontinental ballistic missiles under development in 1958-59, they could hit a target on the moon with remarkable precision, within 2 miles of the intended location. This accuracy was essential, as a miscalculation could send the missile orbiting the moon and potentially returning to Earth with catastrophic consequences. Unlike nuclear explosions on Earth, a lunar detonation would behave quite differently due to the moon's lack of atmosphere. There would be no mushroom cloud in the traditional sense. Instead, the explosion would create a brilliant flash followed by an expanding dust cloud. MIT Associate Professor Areg Danagulian later explained that the nuclear reaction would heat the lunar surface, causing dust to be cast off in a massive plume. As this dust rose above the surface, it would be illuminated by the sun, creating a spectacle visible from Earth, especially if rising from the dark portion of the moon. The team developed elaborate plans to track and measure the explosion. Ground-based telescopes would be supplemented by instruments floating on high-altitude balloons. One innovative tracking method involved using flares made from vaporized sodium, which would create intensely bright reference points. The scientists even calculated the exact amount of sodium needed for the delivery vehicle to be visible to the naked eye from Earth. The explosion would have dramatic effects on the moon itself. The blast would create artificial moonquakes detectable across the entire lunar surface. The geology at ground zero would be instantly vaporized, and due to the moon's lower gravity, some lunar dust would achieve escape velocity and be cast into space permanently. Carl Sagan's calculations showed that while radioactive material would be widely dispersed, very little would reach Earth, a small consolation for what would have been an unprecedented act of celestial vandalism. While Project A119's primary purpose was psychological warfare through celestial spectacle, the team developed multiple justifications for the mission. These fell into 3 categories: scientific, military, and political. The scientific rationale was substantial. A nuclear explosion would allow researchers to study how the moon's surface responded to a controlled impact of known energy. This would reveal details about lunar composition, density, and structure that were otherwise impossible to determine with 1950s technology. The blast would create seismic waves that would help scientists understand the moon's internal makeup, whether it had a core like Earth's and how its layers were arranged. The explosion might also answer questions about lunar dust behavior, the presence of volcanic activity, and even the possibility of water ice or organic compounds hidden beneath the surface. Some scientists speculated that if microbial life had ever existed on the moon, nuclear disruption might bring evidence to the surface. These genuine scientific questions helped researchers justify their participation in what was fundamentally a military operation. From a military perspective, Project A119 would demonstrate America's ability to conduct warfare beyond Earth, a capability no nation had ever displayed. The precision required to hit a lunar target would showcase the accuracy of American missile technology. If the United States could hit the moon, the message to Soviet leaders was clear: American ICBMs could strike anywhere on Earth with similar precision. But the political and psychological objectives were paramount. As the declassified report stated, specific positive effects would accrue to the nation first performing such a feat as a demonstration of advanced technological capability. In simpler terms, nuking the moon would show the world that America was back in the lead. The timing was critical. The plan called for the detonation to occur during a full moon night, when the maximum number of people worldwide could witness America's technological might. The psychological impact on the American public was expected to be profound, a restoration of national confidence after the Sputnik shock. For Soviet citizens, the message would be equally clear: American technology could reach even the moon with devastating force. Contemporary newspapers reveal the anxious national mood Project A119 sought to address. Headlines questioned whether America had fallen fatally behind in the space race, and political cartoons depicted Uncle Sam looking up at Soviet satellites with impotent frustration. A nuclear explosion on the moon would transform this narrative overnight, replacing fear with awe at American power. In a remarkable case of Cold War symmetry, while American scientists were secretly planning to nuke the moon, their Soviet counterparts were developing a strikingly similar scheme. Soviet plans, codenamed Project E4 or E-Project, were part of a broader series of lunar missions being developed in parallel with the American space program. The Soviet lunar program was organized as a progressive series. Project E1 aimed simply to reach the moon, while E2 and E3 involved sending probes to photograph the far side of the lunar surface. The culmination, E4, would involve the detonation of an atomic bomb on the moon, a cosmic exclamation point to Soviet space achievements. Intelligence reports from late 1957 suggested the Soviets had planned to coincide their lunar detonation with the November 7th lunar eclipse, which also marked the anniversary of the October Revolution. This timing would have maximized the propaganda value, allowing Soviet citizens to celebrate their revolution while watching their nation's power literally reflected in the night sky. The Soviet R-7 Semyorka rocket, which had successfully launched Sputnik, was being adapted to carry nuclear payloads. With a range of 8,800 kilometers and the capacity to deliver a 3-megaton thermonuclear warhead, the R-7 represented a credible delivery system for a lunar nuclear mission. The first test launch of this rocket as a weapon would occur in December 1959, but by then, both superpowers had already abandoned their lunar bombing plans. Like their American counterparts, Soviet scientists and military planners ultimately concluded that the risks outweighed the benefits. Technical challenges were substantial, but the Soviets had additional concerns: fears that the warhead might malfunction and fall back on Soviet territory, and apprehension about international condemnation if such a mission became public knowledge. A critical incident in 1962 would later influence both nations' approach to nuclear weapons in space. During the Soviet Project K high-altitude nuclear tests, a 300-kiloton warhead detonated at an altitude of 292,000 meters, melted thousands of kilometers of underground power and telephone cables, and caused a fire at a power plant. This sobering demonstration of the unexpected consequences of nuclear detonations outside Earth's atmosphere likely reinforced the wisdom of abandoning the lunar bombing plans. In January 1959, just months after its inception, Project A119 was abruptly canceled. The Air Force concluded that the potential risks outweighed its benefits, a bureaucratic understatement for what could have been a catastrophic miscalculation. Several factors contributed to this decision. First was the fear of public backlash. As the project's final report acknowledged, unless the climate of world opinion were well prepared in advance, a considerable negative reaction could be stimulated. Even in the height of Cold War competition, military planners recognized that nuclear weapons carried moral implications that transcended national rivalries. Destroying part of what poets and lovers had gazed upon for millennia might prove a propaganda disaster rather than a triumph. Technical concerns also mounted. What if the missile missed its target or malfunctioned? A nuclear warhead falling back to Earth would create an international catastrophe. Additionally, contaminating the moon with radioactive material might compromise future lunar exploration, a possibility that became increasingly important as the space program developed. Dr. Reiffel himself raised environmental objections, warning about destroying a pristine lunar environment. This ecological concern was remarkably forward-thinking for the late 1950s, when environmental consciousness was in its infancy. As Reiffel later told The Guardian, "I am horrified that such a gesture to sway public opinion was ever considered." Between May 1958 and January 1959, Reiffel's team produced 8 detailed reports on the project. These documents, bearing the innocuous title, A Study of Lunar Research Flights, contained all the technical specifications, calculations, and justifications for the lunar nuclear mission. After the project's cancellation, these reports were stored in classified archives, where they remained hidden from public view for decades. In 1987, most of these reports were reportedly destroyed. Only Volume 1 survived, assigned document ID number AD425380 by the Defense Documentation Center. This lone surviving report was finally declassified in 2000, providing the first official confirmation of the project's existence. For over 40 years, Project A119 remained one of America's best-kept Cold War secrets. The project might have stayed buried in classified archives forever, if not for an ironic security breach by one of its own team members. While applying for an academic fellowship at the University of California's Miller Institute in March 1959, Carl Sagan listed 2 classified papers among his publications: Possible Contribution of Lunar Nuclear Weapons Detonations to the Solution of Some Problems in Planetary Astronomy, and Radiological Contamination of the Moon by Nuclear Weapons Detonations. This security violation created a paper trail that writer Key Davidson discovered while researching his 1999 biography, Carl Sagan, A Life. When confronted with this information, Dr. Reiffel finally broke his silence, confirming the project's existence in a series of interviews in 2000. The physicist, by then in his 70s, expressed profound relief that the plan had never moved beyond the drawing board. Project A119 represents a road not taken in humanity's relationship with space. Instead, just 10 years after the project's cancellation, Neil Armstrong would take one small step onto the lunar surface in a mission of peaceful exploration that captivated the world. The shift from potential destruction to scientific discovery wasn't accidental. In 1963, the United States, Soviet Union, and United Kingdom signed the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, prohibiting nuclear weapons tests in the atmosphere, underwater, and in outer space. This agreement was strengthened by the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, which explicitly banned nuclear weapons in space and established that the moon and other celestial bodies should be used exclusively for peaceful purposes. These treaties didn't end all consideration of nuclear devices in space. In December 1969, Apollo scientist Gary Latham suggested detonating a smallish nuclear device on the moon to facilitate research into its geological composition. NASA quickly rejected the idea, noting it would interfere with plans to measure the moon's natural background radiation. The spirit of peaceful exploration had prevailed. When humans finally reached the moon in 1969, they left a plaque reading, "We came in peace for all mankind." The contrast between this message and Project A119's intentions could not be more stark or more instructive about the choices that shape our relationship with the cosmos. If you enjoyed the video, please like it, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to History Scroll for more content like this.